This is the ISG Digital Dish.
Welcome to Digital Dish, a podcast for women's voices and perspectives in the digital world. We interview women in all industries because digital affects them all. As hosts, we want to share our passion and humor about the digital world we're part of, and we each bring a unique perspective and view from women in all parts of business. You're going to hear topics ranging from technical to organizational challenges, anything that speaks to how women are tackling issues to improve their environment.
I'm Jeannie Cuff. I have a deep curiosity on how women approach their careers in digital, and I love to hear their perspective on what they do and how they think about the careers. And of course, talking to smart women is fun.
I'm Lois Coatney, and I love hearing these interviews and bringing both a historical view and a future perspective to those interviews. It's so great to have such a variety of women who do so many things in their digital careers.
And I'm Julie Fernandez. I have a human resources perspective, and I really like to think about how these discussions affect people and organizations.
Together, we wanted to make sure smart women and their point of views were being heard.
Welcome back, everybody, to ISG Digital Dish. Today, I have Lois and Julie today, and we have a little change. We have our Katrin Podmore, the head of marketing for ISG in Europe, who has interviewed a friend of hers from university, Lynn Houmdi, who's a social entrepreneur. Lynn actually used to be a government employee in London, and she left and then had children and really struggled on how to get fit back into a work life after having children. So she started a program called Making Work Work that she describes a little bit, talking about some of the challenges and how we can overcome them. And Katrin had a very organized approach. And I just wanted to interview. Katrin was great. She was so organized about it, way more organized than I am. It was great to listen to her. She really had it down.
Well, she's so organized. I mean, she's been helping to organize us too. I mean, we should probably say a little bit about what Katrin has done to really help us, right? I mean, she's just been, behind the scenes, although ever present in these podcasts.
Absolutely. And if folks, like some of the snappy names for our podcast or some of the intriguing descriptions that kind of draw you in, like that's all Katrin.
Yeah. So
she's been there all along with us, and it'll be interesting to hear her actually take the interview seat.
Yeah, she was so organized. It was great. And at one point, her mic got funky, and so I had to make her repeat it, and she did it beautifully. I was like, wow, that's awesome. Because I had to stop her and said, the mic's not working. All these technical problems we run into. So.
Well, I'm glad you're doing this interview because, I mean, we've seen it. Women have really struggled, keeping everything afloat while we've been home at the pandemic. So I'm really looking forward to hearing this.
You know what? It's a unique perspective, too, because some folks do exit the workforce and then they have those challenges and experiences coming back in. Others take the challenge a different way and they don't exit the workforce. And so that's just a different kind of stress in dealing and navigating your career. So can't wait to hear how the interview goes.
Yeah. And in the pre-interview, she said something fun that I liked about finding the chinks of light. And I just really liked that concept. How do we get to the next place? Finding those chinks of light, and then, okay, it would be me. It'd be plowing through it, making a bigger hole. But other people have different approaches.
All right.
All right. Well, hope you all enjoy the interview, and thanks very much.
Yeah, let's roll it.
Hi, I'm Katrin Podmore and I'm a marketing leader at ISG. I also happen to be on the production team for this very podcast, and today I'm really delighted to be interviewing a very good friend of mine, Lynn Houmdi, for this episode. I've known Lynn for longer than I care to remember, 25 years to be precise. And we met at the University of Manchester when we were both studying politics and modern languages many years ago, and I've been inspired by Lynn ever since. Her career has taken a number of twists and turns over the years, each time with an exciting step into the unknown, whether that be jetting off to teach English in Japan, joining a fast-track European civil service career, or setting up home in Morocco and building a freelancing business around her passions and interests there. Her energy and enthusiasm for a new project are second to none, And during today's interview, I'm hoping you'll all be inspired by her career journey and also her latest project called Making Work Work, which is a program specially designed for women returning to work after some kind of break. So Lynn, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much, Catherine.
Great to have you here.
25 years, that makes me feel not very young.
I know, tell me about it. So I've just given a very quick run through your amazing career, but maybe in your own words, you want to tell us a bit about your own career and background and what you think shaped your path up to this point.
Yeah, thanks. I think when I used to apply for jobs, I would always say there have been 3 constant threads in my career: international and EU relations, policy development and research, and events and communications. But in actual fact, when I was reflecting on my career to speak to you today, I realised that actually probably the most important things that have been the thread are an interest in other people and cultures, which I think began before we met at university, but was definitely given a boost by learning foreign languages and learning about European history and politics. Helping others, I think I've always been more interested in impact than income. So that whole idea of purpose ahead of profit or purpose alongside profit. And certainly more recently, a strong sense of fairness or social justice. I think that's always been with me. I've always had quite a strong kind of ethical compass, but particularly through living in Morocco, which is an emerging economy, and more recent study. And I would say also starting to see the world through a slightly different lens since becoming a mum. That has become more important to me. So it's interesting to see how you've summarized my career and to look back and see that actually all along there were certain values that were really important to me.
Yeah, and becoming a mum certainly changes the world of work, doesn't it?
Definitely.
For what seemed like a pretty long time, looking back on it, 13 years you spent in the European or British civil service, and then you decided to leave all of that security and that sort of built career and go freelance. What inspired you to make that particular leap? Because it was a big jump.
Yeah, it was. And I think now, almost 10 years later, I'm still processing why it was the right thing to do and why I just didn't feel the fit anymore when it had, from when we were at university, I wanted to work in Europe, in the European institutions. That's why I studied European studies. And I did work in the European Commission. And I think when I left, initially I was concerned to speak to my friends and colleagues about my decision because I didn't really know how they would react. I would say some of them were actually quite envious, and they said to me, "Oh, you're so brave, I could never do that." And some were actually completely incredulous. One person said to me, "But Lynn, I thought you were going to become permanent secretary." And looking back, I thought, I think, why did you think that? And I realized that maybe that security and that kind of linear career path never was for me, although when I was younger, I certainly thought it was. And I was really fortunate. I spent, out of 13 years in the civil service, I spent 9 of them abroad. So I had 2 postings in Brussels, 1 at the British Embassy in Berlin. And I have to say, they were the roles that I enjoyed the most. I really enjoyed being in an international environment, using my languages, learning about different cultures, learning about different ways of doing things. And I kind of knew that when I came back, my career trajectory would have been stalled because I was virtually invisible, and B, that Scotland would feel a bit small, and it did. And so at that time, I think I just wanted to challenge myself in a different way. And by the time I left, I had met Yassine, who's my husband, Catherine knows well, and he was in Morocco. And so I decided to go and live and work in my third continent and try something new again. And that didn't completely work out. in terms of what I thought I would go there to do, which was to buy some old pile and turn it into a bed and breakfast. Given the situation of global tourism right now, that's probably no bad thing. I think that something that's really important to me is challenging myself and variety. And although there is a lot of variety in the civil service, I mean, you're almost expected to move around every couple of years. I think I was looking for something more creative and more challenging, and which kind of enabled me to learn a whole set of new skills and expertise.
And so nowadays, I think I'm right in saying that you describe yourself as a social entrepreneur. How would you define that, and what does it mean to you?
Well, it's interesting, actually. I had never heard of social enterprise, although for a long time I worked on climate change and environment policy, so including at the UN level. And so that idea of the interface between business and environmental or social impact was something quite current to me. But it wasn't until I attended an event organised by the BMW Foundation. In fact, the week before I met my husband, it was in London at that very fancy hotel at St Pancras Station. And we had a whole, I think it was 3 days of young, allegedly responsible leaders from Europe and Asia learning about social enterprise and philanthropy. And since then, the model of social enterprise, which is a kind of blend of the business model, so generating income, and the charitable model of non-profit, has really interested me. And this idea that you can generate an income in order to achieve greater social impact has been really interesting for me. And so during my freelancing career, which I have to say has not been linear either, not least because we had a young family, I've tried to sort of move further towards that kind of space of social impact. So working in the third sector with charities and impact businesses and social enterprises, including a charity who I was working for last year during the first lockdown, which turned itself into a food production hub for the local community. We produced 75,000 meals during the first lockdown. And then more recently, collaborating with a group of social businesses called Challenges, who are based in Edinburgh and in 5 sub-Saharan African sites on the Making Work programme.
Cool. Talking of which, and bringing it a little bit closer to home, we've heard a lot in the press. I see stuff written daily about the negative impact of the global pandemic on women's careers. But what positives do you see coming out of the past year in terms of how women can move forward in the world of work?
Well, let's not deny that the impact of COVID and the various lockdown restrictions has fallen massively disproportionately on the shoulders of women, not least because of their caring responsibilities, often their household management responsibilities, often taking on the bulk of homeschooling, and often because of the kinds of roles that women are disproportionately represented in, such as frontline health and care roles, or roles in industries that have been absolutely decimated by the pandemic. But I think we have to extract some kind of positive from the catastrophe, and we have to look forward and try and find chinks of light, I suppose. And I think our experience over the last year has shone a massive spotlight on inequalities and inadequacies in the way we work. And now that Pandora's box is open, I don't believe it can shut. And so I think remote working, which is not the same as working from home with your laptop balanced on one knee and a child on the other, is not remote working. That is in no way effective or productive. But the possibilities that we've all come to recognize in remote working really improve accessibility and flexibility, not only for women, but for anybody for whom a 9 to 5 office-based role doesn't work. And that opens up massive opportunities for a more diverse workplace. I think people who've previously been excluded from the workplace, for example, disabled workers, people who live in rural areas where there isn't a lot of work, people who can't face working in an office beside a lot of other people who maybe can't deal with the commute, people who have perhaps medical conditions that mean that it's really difficult to show up 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. All of those people have an opportunity to access work if they can access it remotely or in some kind of hybrid model. I think there's been a lot of concern about who's in the room. I mean, I mentioned earlier, when I wasn't sitting in an office in Scotland, I was a bit invisible. Now we've all had to become used to our colleagues not being in the room. So that means that that even the people in the room need to be accommodated, they need to have development opportunities, they need to be adequately managed. And so I think that is going to level the playing field for a lot of women who maybe have tended to work part-time. I think closely related to remote working is flexible working. And that, I think, the greater flexibility of work is going to mean a move towards a more results-based kind of way of working and away from this kind of presenteeism of doing your time in the office. And that has to be better for people who maybe can't work for 8 hours at a stretch for whatever reason. I think a big game changer here is that the way we have come to work in the last year has impacted everybody. And so that means this isn't just about mums, it's not just about women, but also men and people who identify differently are seeing these benefits, which means they're going to become much more mainstream than when they were pigeonholed as working mums issues.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's really, like you say, it's really leveled everything. But I'm really interested in your latest project, Making Work Work. Who's it for, and why do you feel so passionately about it?
Well, I think, to be honest, I'm a bit fed up of this idea of a work-life balance. To me, putting life on one side of the scales and work on the other just means you're pitting them against each other and you're never going to find an equilibrium. And so the idea behind Making Work Work is to support people, especially women, to find a blend that really works for them. So it's all about taking a much more holistic approach to work as part of life rather than work being something separate to life. And it's really come about for me because of my personal experience of being a first-time mum in my 40s. And when I worked in that secure job in the civil service, I didn't appreciate all the benefits that come with a job like that. I didn't need the maternity leave. I didn't need the flexible working. I never felt discriminated against because I was a woman. Everything seemed very fair. But as soon as I was out of that environment and my son was 1 and I was looking at going back to work, I just couldn't see how to square the circle. I couldn't see how to find a job that not only used my skills, but enabled me to develop my skills and which would also fit with childcare when I didn't know what childcare I needed until I got a job. And it's just opened a whole new world to me. And I started to research and observe how other women, particularly mums, were trying to navigate this. And then I began to realize that it's not actually just women and mums. A lot of people, especially after a break in their career, just find it hard to get back into something that is really meaningful and that really works. And as a result, we have a lot of people, particularly women, who are doing part-time work that fits, but it's not commensurate with their skills or their earning potential. And so I've developed this program in partnership with Challenges, the social business I mentioned earlier. And it consists of 5 components. There is management and leadership and employability skills training. We've got some content from Brene Brown's Dare to Lead program, which is a really inspirational program. Each of the participants receives some mentoring support. They all have the opportunity to accredit their learning with the Chartered Management Institute, which is an internationally recognized qualification, and they receive post-program support. The program at the moment, this is the pilot that we're running with women returners, is 8 weeks long. So we don't expect people to jump into a job at the end of 8 weeks. So we're supporting them in their transition back into the workplace. And all of that, while all very valuable in itself, is designed to help the women build the 2 things that women always say they need in getting back into work, which is confidence and networks. I don't believe that these women, for the most part, are going to answer job ads and get back into work. They're going to have to find and create the work that really works for them, alongside their commitments, all the commitments that they may have, and the enjoyment of life. So as I mentioned, we're piloting it just now with women returners, and that's funded by the Scottish Government. But we've designed the programme in such a way that we can adapt it to other audiences, for example, older switchers or refugees and migrants. But I'm really passionate about supporting women because of my personal experience as an older mum.
So that's just so valuable, and I love the idea of helping people with confidence and networks. I totally agree that those are the areas that women always say they struggle with. So what is it that you hope will be different for the next generation of young women starting out on their careers in technology or any sphere, really?
I think for the younger generation, they already have different priorities to when we were starting our careers. I read a lot about purpose being important for younger workers, that they're looking for flexibility, that they don't envisage a sort of 30-year-long linear career, and that they're much more interested in upskilling and moving on. And if it hadn't been for COVID, I would have said it was the younger generation that was going to change the world of work because of the flexibility that they seek. However, we've had a global pandemic. And I think what I would hope for that younger generation is that they will have, and I'm confident they will have, the opportunity to work in a way that is much more aligned with their values and their purpose. I think we're seeing a lot of businesses who are following that model of purpose alongside profit. I think they have to be prepared for a journey of lifelong learning. I see that with the women on Making Work Work. Just being out of the workplace for a few months sets people back in terms of their confidence in using modern workplace tools. And I mean things like Zoom and Teams. And when you're working, it's almost natural that you're learning every day. And I think the younger generation are going to have to learn faster and switch quicker than we have. I think they'll be able to engage in work in their way. There's so much more variety, I think, now in the world of work, and so much more acceptance of switching and changing and a less linear career path, that hopefully they will encounter the feeling of being a round peg in a square hole a lot less often. And the thing that I hope for the most is around job design. If all jobs could be designed to be the size of one person, we would come an awful long way. I think there are still far too many jobs in the economy which are designed for somebody who is willing to work more than a standard working week, who has a lot of support at home, often in the shape of a wife, and who is willing to spend, until the pandemic, who was willing to spend a lot of time commuting, and that commute time is working as well. So I think a lot of work needs to be done around job design, just to make sure that jobs are people-sized.
Yeah, you're so right. You're so right. So to close out, if you could leave our listeners with any words of advice based on your own experience and your own journey about charting a course through their own careers, what would those words of advice be?
I think personally, I would say ditch the expectations. I think when I left the civil service, I had all these ideas of expectations that other people had of me, when in actual fact, they were my own expectations of myself. And once I kind of lowered that bar, life became so much easier. So I think don't follow what you think are others' expectations of you. And related to that, I think it's important to understand your own motivations. And this is something I'm working on with the women on the program just now. And what I realize now that I perhaps didn't realize when I was younger is that I like a lot of variety. I like to be challenged. And I like to work in collaboration. I really do not enjoy working on my own, and that's not how I deliver my best work. Another thing that I'm seeing with the women I'm working with just now is a tendency to be far too hard on themselves. I would say don't be hard on yourself. Every failure is an opportunity to grow. Every mistake is an opportunity to learn. And we've mentioned it already, but networks are so important. I mean, I wouldn't be here today had Catherine and I not met at university.
There you go.
And you never know where you might be able to help somebody or they might be able to help you. And often it's in the unlikeliest of places, but the network, I think, is absolutely crucial.
Wise words. Thank you so much, Lynn. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a pretty interesting interview. One of the things that I thought Lynn was really interesting about was, which I'm a believer in, serendipity, taking you in interesting ways. So I feel like for me, serendipity was like taking me, I just kind of went wandering until I ended up in IT. But I feel like serendipity was driven for her by what happened to her in her life. She didn't have kids, then she had kids, and that changed her whole approach to it. So I think serendipity is something that we can't ignore as part of what happens to us in our work life.
Well, she talked early on, I don't know if she really defined what she meant by a nonlinear career path. I think she talked about what her career path was, which was very nonlinear. And that got me thinking too about, I think we tend to find in university, we choose, okay, I'm going to be in accounting or I'm going to be in something. And then you get your degree and sometimes we change, right? Like you said, we'll find another path because you find something that interests you. But she literally, it sounded like she moved from, especially because of her purpose ahead of profit, her desire to be in public service and helping her environment around her. Plus sounded like she was in private sector at different times. And one of the things I checked up on when I was listening to her, I looked up what is the number of jobs that we tend to have versus what millennials now have. And it said that the number of jobs that in our age group will have probably 12 jobs in our lifetime, but millennials will almost double that. Wow. And that's because I think what you were talking about, Jeannie, it's this recognition that there's many things that you want to do in life. And is it okay that you can flip around, you can take more lateral moves, right, versus vertical moves? And that's probably something that, especially for those who have, a variety of things that they want to accomplish in their careers, they can do. I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty healthy, but I also wonder if there isn't some element of that we're embedding in the youth of today. I have 320-somethings, right? So I'm also very in tune to the number of job changes, that they might be, or career changes they might be expected to have. But I also am watching, 3 young adults go through the college process. And at many times I have paused and actually asked or suggested, are counselors really helping, the youth by pointing them in so many different directions? It seems to create folks that are in university or, jump from path to path to path before they've even tried anything, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if, sometimes I'm certain it's for the good, and, that somebody is just not walking in a path. They need some redirection and encouragement to change, and it's okay to change. Other times I feel like, how much do we risk creating folks that are kind of always looking for greener grass before they've even, and before they've even had the right shake at something? How do we balance that?
It's funny that you say that, Julie, because harking back to our very first interview with Marie Pardee was Plan Now for the Future You. I was thinking of that when we were talking about this, because I'm like, she said, sometimes it's great to have a job and you can learn to, and you get good at it and you learn to like it. And I think that's what you're kind of saying, Julie, right?
Yeah, I mean, if I can put some time in, who knows? Like, you do acquire skills, and then you're bound to find, even at a job that is not maybe your ideal job, like you find things within a job, and you have to be there. You have to do something for a while, right? To figure out what are those things that I like, or what are those things that I'm good at. I can't know it until I'm there, and then I can start some steering. But what if we add serendipity too early, right? or maybe the first one is serendipitous, but after that, like learn something so that you don't risk being a master of nothing out of 20 different jobs. These are my fears for my 20-somethings, right? Can you hear them?
I got two 20-somethings too. I totally understand that. But I also say to them, make sure you learn whatever interests you, the technology, because everything's going to be technology driven or app driven. And there's so many aspects of that could actually fill it in. And I think we talked about that with Mary Patry a few episodes ago. I think it's so hard for kids to know, because I don't even think the counselors know what the opportunities are out there. Do you? I mean, I think
it's, bottom line, it's a balance, right? I think there's a bit of, you need to be, if you're going to be spending 40 plus hours a week doing something, you better at least like what you're doing, right? It may not be your dream, but you got to like what you're doing. But also you're going to be working, I don't know, how many years do we end up working? 40 years, 50, I don't even want to say the word.
Don't say it.
But that's a long time to make choices, to make changes, to, explore areas that you're interested in and still build, some good trajectory or build some good expertise. So, I think there's probably not the right road, or there's not a standard road. It is going to be, everybody needs to figure out what their road is. And, it was just delightful to hear what Lynn talked about, and just hear her talk about what her journey was and how it's been very fulfilling for her. So it's inspirational, I guess, that everybody has a different route that they can go.
Well, I think also her program, Making Work Work in England, is really interesting in Britain, because she said it's basically designed to build confidence and networks with women. And I think if nothing else we take away from that, the networking is how you grow and how you follow some path, whether it's serendipitous or a straight line like a doctor or a lawyer. I don't know. I think everybody's so different, but you have to be there for them. So,
well, maybe there's a measure out there where you say, I'm good at leveraging the serendipity that does happen in my life, right? If I can have all things happen, or me drive, or however much span of control, like if I come out and I'm thinking like, this has been kind of a good path traveled, then I guess I'm good at that. And if not, then maybe you need to network a little bit more.
There you go. Well, I think that's a great thing. And she did talk about, with the global pandemic and for women, the ability kind of even the playing field. If one positive thing, there's a lot of negatives for women, but even the playing field where there's more flexibility, that really hopefully is something that will allow women to make lots of different choices. So, yeah.
Right. And the fact that out of this pandemic, it may actually make it easier for women to work and manage a family. And I think that was an important point too. And it looks like a lot of trends are that way. So
yeah, what an inspirational conversation though. So thank you. Thank you, Katrin, for bringing that forward.
Yeah. And thanks to Katrin, because she's moving on to different pastures. I'm not going to call them greener. I'm going to call them different.
Her own serendipity.
Her own serendipity. There you go. So we'll miss Katrin. I know we have someone else picking up because Katrin did a lot of work for us on the back end and the marketing and stuff like that. So we'll miss Katrin.
We'll miss you.
Yeah. Okay. Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on ISG Digital Dish. If you like our podcast, Subscribe and please rate and review us. Thanks.